Hello and welcome to PyTexas. Thank you for attending my talk, How to Build and Deploy Your First Python Slackbot on DigitalOcean's app platform. My name is Mason Egger and I am a developer advocate at DigitalOcean. If you have any questions about this talk or anything in general, feel free to reach out to me on my Twitter at Mason Egger. You can also watch me break all the things if you watch my live stream on Twitch. And if you have any other questions for me that you want to email me, you can always find me at mason@do.co. So as an employee of DigitalOcean, I just want to say that DigitalOcean loves PyTexas. DigitalOcean is proud to be a keystone sponsor of PyTexas. For those of you that are unaware of DigitalOcean, we are a cloud provider that focuses on simplicity and the developer experience. You may know us from our tutorials. And if you would like, after this presentation and you're new to DigitalOcean, you can try out DigitalOcean and get $100 credit for 60 days by going to the link do.co/PyTexas2020. So this talk, what we're going to do is I'm going to build a Slackbot in Python really quickly. It's going to be as fast as I can get a Slackbot going, and then we're going to deploy it to DigitalOcean's app platform. So we're going to build us a Slackbot. We're going to go through all the process of setting up our Slackbot inside of the API and the web UI, getting it installed into our Slack channel and all of that. And then we're going to deploy it to DigitalOcean's app platform and demonstrate the awesomeness of DigitalOcean's latest product. You can find all the code for this presentation on my GitHub after this if you'd like to deploy this yourself. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get coding. So we're going to go ahead and start with an empty GitHub repository here, pytexas-bot. It has nothing but a README in it. We're going to go ahead and open it up in VS Code and create our app.py. But before we get coding, we need to install the proper packages so we can work with Slack and Flask. So the first thing we're going to do is create ourselves a virtual environment called PyTexas with python-m, venv, and then put it in our virtual env directory. And then we're going to activate our virtual environment by doing bin activate. And now that we're in here, let's go ahead and check our version of Python, which we have Python 3.8.5 installed. I typically alias Python to Python 3 in my terminal, so I don't have to constantly be typing Python 3. And with that, let's go ahead and install our dependencies. So we're going to need Flask to actually run our Python bot to receive web requests. And then we're going to want the Slack client, which is a Python library that allows us to interact with our Slack channel and send messages. But we're also going to want the Slack events API so that our Slack bot can listen to events inside of our app and then inside of our channel. And when it sees an event, send a message via the client. So we're going to go ahead and install these. And what we need to do now is we need to freeze our requirements file into a requirements.txt. This will be required and installed inside of our app platform app once we deploy it to DigitalOcean. So now we have our requirements, our app.py, and we're ready to go ahead and start writing some code. So we're going to do from Flask, import Flask. And we're also going to import a couple of other packages that we're going to need. We're going to go ahead and need OS so we can get some environment variables. We're going to want to import logging because we're going to want to do a little bit of logging. We need to import our Slack library. So from Slack, we're going to import the web client. This web client will allow us to go ahead and send messages to our Slack channel. And then from the Slack events API, we're going to import the Slack event adapter. And this will be an adapter that allows us to listen in and get messages and then process them as we need to. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and initialize our Flask application. It's pretty standard boilerplate Flask application. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and set up our Slack events adapter and our Slack web client variables. So that way we have these objects ready to go when we're ready to use them. So what we need to do now is we're just going to do Slack events adapter. And we're just going to make a Slack events adapter object. And this is where we're going to use os.getenv to get a Slack events token that we will pass in as an environment variable. This is basically a key that will allow us to actually listen in on these. And then we also need to pass in our Flask app. So that way it knows how to actually listen in on these things. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to create our Slack web client. And we just create a web client right here. And we're going to be doing another token, but this one is going to be actually another token. This is actually going to be what I'm going to call our Slackbot token. And there's basically two different tokens here that you can use with a Slackbot. There's a typical deploy token, which you'll need for actually doing the messages. And then there's a signing secret, which is the one that we're going to use for our Slack events adapter. And that's how we're going to use those. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and create, just go ahead and get our app ready to go. So ready to run, we're going to do if dunder name equals dunder main. Then we're going to create a logger so we can actually see what's going on. We're going to set the log level to debug. So we'll basically be able to see any, basically all the messages that come through, we're going to be able to see. You may want to set this to an environment variable so you can change the logging level from your app through the environment variables instead. But for now, we're just going to set it as debug. We're going to go ahead and add a handler for this. Logging.stream handler. And we're going to do our app.run host that we're going to host it on is going to be 0.0.0.0 because we want to host it externally. And we're going to set it to port 8080. This is the default port that App Platform listens on. We can change this if we want, but since it's not hurting us to run it on port 8080, we're going to go ahead and just run it there. So the next thing we need to do is actually write the code that gets our Slack message and performs an action. So we're going to go ahead and create a function called message. And it's going to take in a single argument of payload. This is what's going to be passed in from the Slack events adapter, and it's going to basically pass in the payload of the message for us to analyze. So what we're going to do is we're going to do event equals payload dot get event, and if we don't get an event, let's go ahead and just return an empty dictionary. And let's go ahead and set up our message block. So Slack has a very particular format for sending messages, and it's in a kind of structured JSON format that we can use basically by doing some dictionaries. So what we do is you send these messages via blocks. So we're going to go ahead and create a very simple message block that we can use to send our current message. And basically we need to specify what type of block this is, and this is a section block. And then we need to specify the text. And then where we go here is we have another dictionary in here where we specify the type, which we're going to say is markdown, MRKDWN. And then for the text that we're actually going to send, we're going to go ahead and create this bot to respond to a hello statement. So we're going to say hello PyTexas inside of our Slackbot channel, or the channel where the Slackbot is installed, and it's going to respond back with a very Texas saying, which is going to be howdy, and then we're going to do face with cowboy hat emoji because we're Texas and Texas is cowboy hats. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our text, and what we're going to do is we're going to get our text from our event. So we've gotten the event from the payload, we know what's happening, now we need to actually see the text that came through this message, and we need to see, we're going to analyze it. There's a lot more things or like attributes inside of the payload that you can get, such as user and all of that, timestamp. So you don't just have to use it on text. There's a lot of other things you can get here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to see if hello PyTexas is in our text.lower. Let's go ahead and do lower because we don't really care too much about capitalization here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to get our channel ID, and we're going to use this again from the event. We're going to get our channel. So this way we know which channel to respond back on. And then we're going to craft our message. So we have our message block, which is ready, but we still need a little bit more inside of that, inside of our message to tell it where to go. So we go ahead and craft our message, which is set to, let's set our channel is set to our channel ID, and our blocks we're going to go ahead and set to an array with message block in it as the single element. So you could send multiple blocks. We've created one message block, but if you wanted to send multiple things, you can send multiple message blocks, and it kind of adds this little separation to it. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to say Slack web client dot chat post message, and we're going to unpack our message here in our parameters. And we've got one more thing to do. So we've set up all of this, but the only thing we haven't done is we haven't used our Slack events adapter to actually see what's going on, to listen to the messages that are coming through. So we're going to just use a really nice decorator that they've given to us for a Slack events adapter, and we want to trigger this when we detect a message. So this is actually pretty much it. We're going to go ahead and save it, and then Black reformats it for me. And this is pretty much a very basic Slack app that uses our events adapter and web client to basically, using the events adapter, we scan all incoming messages inside of our Slack channel. And then what we do is we detect if hello PyTexas is in the text. If it is, then our bot is going to send a little cute message back saying howdy, and it's going to be good. This is what I would consider a very minimalistic, very basic Slack bot. Could be a nice little greeting bot for you. You can change it to do whatever you want. I will actually post in the description. There is a DigitalOcean tutorial on how to do a much more complicated bot, and I will make sure that we post that in the description later. So now that we have all of this done, let's go ahead and commit this and deploy it to DigitalOcean's app platform. And then once we've got it deployed, then we're going to go ahead and do all of the setup on the Slack side, so that way our Slack bot is registered, and then we're going to be ready to go. One quick thing before we continue and push our code, I did notice that we have a bug in the code. We need to come up here and add Slack/events to our Slack events adapter creation. So essentially, without this, we would not have actually had a route for it to say, this is where to send Slack events. So basically, the way that this object creation works is you get a token, you get a route that you're going to route to, and you associate it with a Flask app. So luckily, we caught this before we pushed. But even if we did, we would make the change, push up, the code would automatically deploy. It wouldn't be that big of an issue, but I'm happy that I caught it now. So we do a git status, and we see that we have .vs code, app.py, and requirements. So we're going to git add app.py and requirements.txt. Going to go ahead and do a git commit and say init commit. And now we just do a push. And now our code is live on our GitHub page. So if we come over back here to GitHub, we are ready to go. And we have our app. So, I actually made a mistake in my previous thing. Before we deploy this, we actually need to do a couple of steps in the Slack API. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the Slack API, and we're going to go ahead and create our app. I'm going to call this PyTexas bot, and I'm going to install this in my personal one. It's called Gallifrey because I'm a Doctor Who nerd. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to give our bot some basic permissions. We need to add an OAuth scope here, and we're going to go ahead and give it the chat write permissions. And then we're going to go ahead and install our app to our workspace. We go ahead and allow this. And now we have our OAuth access token. So this is our first token that we need. So we're going to go ahead and copy this. And I'm actually just going to come up real quick here. And I'm going to dump it in the README real quick. And we'll come back and get it later. So that is the first token that we need. And now we need to get the signing secret for our events API, so that way we can actually read the messages that are coming in. So Slack will encrypt these with the secret, and we need to get them. So we get those by clicking on the basic information tab, and then scrolling down here to the signing secret, clicking show, and copying this. Now I'm going to go ahead and just put this again in my README. Make sure I don't commit this. Do not commit these in there, and I'm not going to. But now we have both of our tokens, and we're able to deploy to app platform and be ready to go. So now let's go ahead and deploy our app to app platform. From the DigitalOcean panel, you can see that there's a new icon over here for apps. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. And we're going to click on create app. And the first thing we need to do is configure our GitHub to actually allow us to be able to deploy this app. So I click on my personal user, and then I click select repositories, and I select the PyTexas app, and I save that. And now we are able to deploy our application. So we go ahead and deploy our PyTexas bot. We're going to deploy it into the New York region. This page automatically detects the region that is closest to you and figures out which one it is. And then we're going to deploy from our main branch. And anytime we push to the main branch or merge into the main branch, it's automatically going to auto deploy our bot. So now it's basically getting the code and analyzing it. It's detected that it's a Python web service. We're going to go ahead and add a couple of environment variables. We're going to add our Slackbot token variable, which is this XOXB token that we have. And this token, as we said earlier, will allow us to actually send messages on our Slackbot's behalf. We can go ahead over here and click encrypt. And now we can't change that token anymore. If no one can read it, and if anybody wants to actually change it, they have to delete that environment variable and re-add it. You can't just change it or copy it. There's no way to get the data out of here. So the next thing we need is our events token, and this token is what basically is going to allow us to listen to events and decrypt them from Slack. So we paste our token in here and we encrypt it. We're going to go ahead and just run this with Python app.py. We could use something like GUnicorn to actually, deploy that with like deploy it through a WSGI and stuff. But since this is a very basic app, I'm not really going to feel the need to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. I do not want to save the Slackbot token. Thank you. And here we select our plans. For apps that actually require compute, you would select a basic plan. We can determine how much RAM and CPU we want to get it. If we go to the Pro plan, we can scale horizontally and add a lot of containers if we needed to. But from here, we basically just launch our basic app. And now we just wait for our app to go, and then once it comes up, we will see the URL and we will test it to make sure that it works really quick, or that it's at least responding, and then we'll go from there. So yeah, now we just wait for our app to deploy. We can view our logs, the deployment logs, in real time as it's installing everything for us. But yeah, now we just wait a couple minutes and our app will deploy, and then we'll be ready. While we wait on our app to deploy, let's go ahead and install our app into our Slack channel. So we basically just come down over here to the PyTexas bot, and we click more, and we're going to add this app to a channel, and we're going to add this bot to our PyTexas bot channel. And now when we come back over here, we can see that the PyTexas bot has joined. So once the app is ready, we'll already have it installed, and we'll be able to test it as soon as it's ready. Okay, our app has successfully deployed. So if we come up here and we click on this link, we will take us to our app. Now, since we had nothing at the root index, we're obviously going to get a 404 here. But if we type in /Slack/events, we will get this cute little message that says, these are not the Slack bots you are looking for. And this is basically a way of verifying that our endpoint did respond, and it's responding as we would intended with the Slack way, because this isn't a properly sent message. Now that our app is successfully deployed, we can grab this URL, and now we can actually subscribe our bot to some event subscriptions by clicking on the event subscription link over here and enabling them. Then we send it our request API, or URL, and it will come up and say, hey, we verify that this actually is working, which is great. Now all we need to do is subscribe our bot to some events, and we want to subscribe it to message.channels, so that way we can actually listen to the messages from the channel and click Save Changes. And because we have now made this change, we now have to reinstall our app. So we just come up here and we click Reinstall. It asks us to confirm again, and we're like, yes, we're okay with this. And now our app has been reinstalled. And if we come over here and we bring this back and we type hello PyTexas, our PyTexas bot responds with howdy and a little cowboy hat, and everything is running and ready to go. I do want to point out that as you saw from our GitHub repository, DigitalOcean's app platform is a fully functioning PaaS. We dealt with no server code whatsoever. I simply uploaded a Flask API and we were ready to go. And that's kind of the magic of DigitalOcean's app platform. I hope all of you will try it out, or you'd like to just try out DigitalOcean for the first time. do.co/PyTexas2020 will get you $100 credit for that. We do have, free static site offerings through this, and the apps are roughly the same price as our droplets are. So I think it's a pretty good deal. But yeah, I hope that everybody will get a chance to try out our app platform, and thank you everyone for attending. Thank you PyTexas for putting on this conference. It's always a pleasure to be a sponsor, and I hope everyone will enjoy the rest of the conference. We have a lot of really good talks lined up, and thank you again. Enjoy the conference. One last thing before I go. Don't forget to sign up for DigitalOcean's first ever global community conference at digitalocean.com/deploy. It'll be held on November 10th through 11th and will be a 24-hour community experience. I'll be speaking and a lot of my other colleagues will as well. I hope to see you there.